What's up, fam? We're back with the 15th patch of the year. We've got ourselves some pretty big updates for this patch. Let's get right into it. Starting off with Champions of minor changes, Aurelia's base health has increased but her HP regen will decrease. Cooldown on Zara's passive gets nerfed and AD ratio in Israel's Q will be reduced by 10%. Yasuo is getting a buff, which seems all in all bad news for solo queue players. His base armor has increased, the additional AD ratio of his E skill has been removed, but its base damage has increased, and the damage increase per stack also gets a buff. Varus' base AD increases by 2, the kill reward of his passive gets buffed, but the on-hit damage on his W has decreased. Shyvana's E skill gets nerfed in both human and dragon form. It might seem like a buff for human form, but all things considered, it is indeed a nerf. Aurora gets an immediate nerf, which is not surprising. The bonus movement speed on her passive will reduce and her ult's base damage and AP ratio will be nerfed as well. The AP ratio on Aurelion Sol's Q skill per second damage has decreased, and its explosion damage will be nerfed as well. However, he does get compensated with a new 12% Stardust ratio. His E skill now consumes a bit more mana but gains an additional Stardust stack for every 4 enemy units killed. Leona's passive and W damage will be nerfed, which might not exactly have a huge impact as dealing damage isn't her main role. Silas's Q cooldown will decrease but its explosion damage gets nerfed. The AP ratio of his W skill's damage and healing gets nerfed but gets compensated with new bonus HP ratio. The AP ratio of his E skill will also be reduced. Yone gets late game damage buffs on his Q but gets a late game cooldown nerf on his ult. Zed's Q skill base damage increases late game but its AD ratio will be decreased, and the late game cooldown of his ults will also get a nerf. Akali's W cooldown gets buffed late game, her ult damage has increased but its late game cooldown will be nerfed. Cassie's mana cost for all of her skills gets reduced, and her base mana increases but her growth mana gets nerfed, and the AP ratio damage of her Q and E skill will decrease as well. Skarner receives a buff to his growth HP and mana cost of his Q skill, but enemy champions behind Skarner can no longer be kidnapped with his E skill. Now moving on to item changes, Hextech Rocket Belt's HP will increase while Cosmic Drive gets buffed on both health and ability power. Storm Surge's movement speed and damage will be increased. Kraken's passive will now deal 80% damage when used by ranged champions. Static Shift's price and movement speed get nerfed, Dominic's armor penetration gets reduced, Death Dance's armor will be buffed to 50. Most of the boots will be heavily nerfed. The cost of Mercury's treads, steel caps, Ionian boots, and swiftness will increase. Sorcerer's magic penetration gets reduced to 15, and Berserker's attack speed gets reduced to 30%. As for Rune's, Fleet Footwork's healing will decrease early game but increase late game, and Dark Harvest's cooldown will be buffed. And that is all I got for you today. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.